Welcome to the Earning Freedom Podcast and Success After Prison. I am Michael Santos with michaelsantos.com and prisonprofessor.com. Every day I'm striving to provide new content that will inspire people in prison or inspire people who are going through prison. And on this episode, which is another episode, I think it's number 16 of Success After Prison, I am continuing to read the audio version of this book, Success After Prison: How I Built Assets Worth $1 million Within 2 Years of Release from 26 Years Inside, and how you can succeed too. Now, I wrote this book specifically for the people that I try to serve. And who are those people? They are people who are living in struggle. Our country currently incarcerates 2.3 million people. And it's my job to reach into those prisons and help those individuals understand how the relationship between how they adjust in confinement and how they return to society has a direct relationship. You see, if you adjust well in prison, you can open opportunities that few people would expect from anybody who has been incarcerated. That's what the Earning Freedom program is all about. I have an entire course on it. In fact, it comes with a series of workbooks like this, as well as some literature, a series of podcasts and DVDs. And I'm trying to pipe this message into prisons, jails across the country, or wherever there are schools that are serving that population that is vulnerable to going inside. And this particular segment of the program is to demonstrate that those individuals who do adjust well, who do learn to reject the criminal lifestyle, who do learn to develop critical thinking skills, they can create a success pattern that will advance them not only through prison, but especially when they return to society. And I'm living, breathing proof of that. Now, I host two websites, michaelsantos.com and prisonprofessor.com, and I offer show notes. Anybody who would like to get a free digital copy of this book that I am reading in 20-minute installments can very easily get that just simply by visiting the website, michaelsantos.com or prisonprofessor.com, and just entering the best email address, and I will send you a digital copy of this book instantaneously. It's automated. But if you want a softcover book, you can obviously order that from the websites or from Amazon. You can look at my coursework material. You can see how passionate I am about trying to inspire people who live in prison, living the message that I try to convey. I try to give them living, breathing proof that what I never ask anybody to do anything that I didn't do while I was serving 26 years in prison, and that I am doing right here in society. So in the previous episode, I spoke about the importance of building networks and how I began doing that while I was incarcerated and continued doing that when I came back to society. And now in this chapter, I'm going to continue reading about how that evolved and how it contributed to me getting to controlling more than $1 million worth of assets within 2 years of my release. So in early 2013, I began sending letters to professors who taught criminal justice courses in the San Francisco Bay Area. If they thought it would be helpful, I offered to visit and provide their students with a different perspective. Now, many students who majored in criminal justice wanted to pursue careers in corrections, probation, or other law enforcement professions. And I knew the students would have read many theoretical textbooks on corrections or different sociological theories. So listening to someone who could share firsthand experiences might contribute to their educational experience. Now, as an aside, let me say that some of the goals that I'd set when I got out, I want to recap that, were to not only create programs to help people in prison prepare for success, but also to help the formerly incarcerated transition into the labor market, which I've done, and also to spread awareness on why our nation's commitment to mass incarceration is one of the greatest social injustices of our time. And I would do that by speaking. And speaking to people in a criminal justice course, I really believe would help me influence individuals who are going to go into this career, help them see what could we do better so that we could create channels or pipelines that more people who are in prison come out successfully, so that we could reverse that pipeline of the school to prison pipeline and instead create a pathway to success for all people, regardless of past bad decisions or current circumstances. So that was my vision. And when I reached out to those universities, that's what I was trying to accomplish, to further that end. I just want you to see the connection between everything that I am doing and how that led to my success after prison. So in sending those letters, Dr. Jeffrey Snipes I sent those letters. Dr. Jeffrey Snipes from San Francisco State University was one of the recipients, and he responded to my letter. He led the criminal justice department at San Francisco State University, and he invited me to visit with him at the school. Now, at that time, I'd never been on a university campus before. I probably say that again in the book, but I just wanted to make that clear. In my life, despite the influence that universities had on my journey through 26 years in prison, I'd never stepped foot on a campus before. So Jeff's email encouraged me. So I had invitations to speak at other universities later in the school year, including UC Berkeley and Stanford. But at that moment, I'd never been on a campus, and I really looked forward to meeting Jeff and walking through the campus. He told me that he had read one of my books when he was in graduate school years earlier. Again, I want you to see the connection. So while I was in prison, I was interviewing some of the men around me to write their stories and to help more people understand what was going on in their lives. All of that work resulted in me publishing a book. I mean, go back, connect the dots. First, I had to educate myself. Then I had to learn how to write really well and confidently. Then I had to start building a track record of publishing. Then I eventually got a book. And because I got a book, this individual that I didn't know and that didn't know me was reading my book while he was in graduate school, which was awesome. And now I'm out of prison, and he's inviting me to go down there and meet him at San Francisco State University, where he is the head of the criminal justice department. So when I visited San Francisco State for the first time, I just felt this sense of what I had missed as a consequence of the bad decisions I made as a young man. I mean, thousands of students walked around the campus, and they all looked as if they had so much promise. Jeff and one of his colleagues listened as I told them my story, the same story that I revealed in this book right here, Earning Freedom. Basically the same story. I walked him through how I went to prison, what went on in my journey in prison, how I tried to prepare for a life of success. And we spoke for about an hour. And then Jeff asked if I would like to work at SFSU, San Francisco State. And I didn't quite get his question when he asked, do I want to work there? I mean, my thoughts were that we were just having a discussion about my making a contribution as a guest speaker. But instead, he was asking if I wanted to become a part of the faculty as a guest lecturer and adjunct professor. Now, at that time, I'm still inside the halfway house. I haven't even finished my prison sentence yet, and he's asking me if I want to be a professor. So universities had a huge influence on my adjustment all through prison, as I've said. And although I didn't get to experience university campus life as a student, Jeff and his colleagues, they opened an amazing opportunity for me to teach. And he invited me to design my own course that we titled The Architecture of Incarceration. And I began teaching in August of 2013, less than 3 weeks after I concluded my prison sentence. So, I mean, let's just take a moment and reflect on that. I went to prison. I was in prison when I would begin teaching. I'd already had 26 years, more than 26 years, 9,500 days of prison behind me. And then 3 weeks later, I'm going onto a university campus, and students who are eventually going to be probation officers or correctional officers or law enforcement officers or prosecutors are calling me professor. And it was, pretty awesome, but I just have to remind them, I just got out of jail. I'm not really a professor, but, in fact, I was hired as an adjunct professor, a guest lecturer. I'm not a staff lecturer. And so I was on staff getting a paycheck from San Francisco State. And I just took that as a real validation of how my adjustment through prison would result in opportunities that few people would have thought possible. And that's just a start. So I spent hundreds of hours preparing for the semester. And although my job only required me to teach 30 students, I accepted every student who wanted to enroll because I like to have a big audience. I wanted to influence as many people as I could on what we could do to improve outcomes of the prison system. And teaching opened opportunities to influence people who would devote their careers to criminal justice. And I really wanted to serve them well, just like I want to serve you well. I am always striving to be authentic and, being the real deal. Somebody who not only went through prison, but came back successfully, and somebody could influence people on why we need to improve our criminal justice system, but also influence people who are going through it, how to emerge successfully. And I give away so much content for free because I'm really passionate about this subject. And so in designing the course, I set this goal of helping the students understand influences that would lead to our nation's massive prison system. I think it's a huge flaw. So we incarcerate more people per capita than any other nation on earth. But the U.S. didn't always have the world's largest prison population. Our commitment to mass incarceration didn't begin until the early 1970s, accelerating around the time that I began serving my time when President Reagan was still in the White House, launching the war on drugs. So I wanted students in my class to understand how we architected this path to mass incarceration. And to begin the class, I would tell the students about my history of selling cocaine as a young man and about my transformation while serving 26 years as a prisoner. They were somewhat astounded, I think, when I revealed my past. I mean, these were students who in a major university, and they're not used to having their professor being some guy who just got out of prison. I'm sure their parents weren't so thrilled about it either, but I could offer a unique perspective, just like each of you can do, just like anyone in this audience can do. If you're going through struggle, if you're in challenge, if you're having a difficult time in your life and you can overcome that, guess what? You have value. You have value. And that's what I'd like for you to be recognizing and understanding, because the more you understand that, the more you can start crafting a path that will lead you to success. So whenever students referred to me as professor, I'd insist that they just call me Michael, and reminding them that I'd only recently finished serving a prison term. We spent that first class going over my complete history. And I encourage them to ask anything about my past, my prison experience, or my expectations about life after release. Each class lasted nearly 3 hours, and I pledged to give 100%, to be 100% authentic with them. And so during the second class, after giving them my background of what brought me to prison, we would discuss the evolution of punishment in Western civilization. Now, prior to the 18th century, for those of you who don't know, we didn't use prisons as confinement as a punishment. Instead, we only used confinement as a kind of holding center until after the trial. Now, after a finding of guilt, the offender would usually suffer some type of corporal punishment, meaning authorities would punish the body, usually with mutilation or death. They would behead convicted felons or rip apart the body in grotesque ways. One example was drawing and quartering. They would tie a rope to each limb and fasten each rope to a different horse. Then, on cue, the horses would race off in different directions, ripping apart the person's body. Now, other examples of corporal punishment included setting the body on fire, or drilling holes into the flesh and then filling the holes with molten steel, or chopping a head off, putting it on a stake, and lighting it on fire. So I wanted the students to really understand that historical way that Western civilization responded to offenders. So you can get that picture, right? It was very gruesome, very violent, and not all, at the end of the day, not too effective in improving what people wanted was to have fewer crimes. In fact, there was a lot of talk in the early literature about during these beheadings and during these hangings, when the crowds would gather around to look at what was going on and to cheer on the punishment, there'd be a lot of pickpocketing going on. So there was crime going on just as they were trying to discourage crime. And that's what really we have a history of doing, is creating these ineffective programs. So in the third class of my course, and I'm giving you this synopsis of how I taught the students at SFSU to get them to understand how our nation's prison system evolved. So I designed that third class showing them what happened during the 18th century. Okay? Some of you may know, scholars referred to that era as the Enlightenment era. It was a time when people had more hope. And there were two philosophers, some of you may have heard of them, Thomas Hobbes and Jonathan Locke. But they presented different theories on human behavior. So according to Thomas Hobbes's view, people were basically beasts by nature. All right? He wrote this book called Leviathan that said, really, the only reason that people don't break laws is because they're afraid of getting caught. Because they're beasts by nature, and that's the way they think, well, we need to have really extraordinary punishments to keep society in line. So Hobbes' theory held that people would only refrain from breaking laws if the state maintained a severe penal or punishment system that would really make wrongdoing so unbearable, the thought of it, that they would refrain from criminal behavior. John Locke, on the other hand, a different philosopher who lived in the same era, had a contrasting theory. He believed that all people came into the world with a blank slate. He used the Latin term, a tabula rasa, meaning when you come into the world, we're all the same. We don't have anything in our head. But they were neither good nor bad. But they learned behavior through their observations and experiences. Does that make sense? People may have learned behaviors that led to criminal actions, meaning, they come into the world and they see, people steal, or they see people get violent, or they see these types of things as they're growing up from the time, they're in the womb. Maybe they hear experiences of violence, or as soon as they come out, they're taking, and all of these visions and observations are making an impression on the infant's or the unborn child or the child's mind, and that's how they learn behaviors. But John Locke believed that just as they can learn behaviors, they can unlearn behaviors. Obviously, you can see I kind of identify with that John Locke theory because that's what I'm trying to help my brothers and sisters and people who are in struggle do, who are living in struggle, is if they've learned behaviors that have put them there, I want them to believe and know that they can unlearn those behaviors and instead learn the behaviors of masterminds. That's what I teach in the Earning Freedom program. That's what I teach in Success After Prison. I teach that success after prison comes with the decisions that you make while you're in prison. And that's a fundamental point that I try to, bring home in every presentation. So those types of philosophical questions I explained to the students led other philosophers to question the way that we responded to criminal behavior. And in the next episode, because I'm already approaching the 20-minute mark here, I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened. But my message for you, a closing message for you here in this episode of Success After Prison, is to be thinking about how you want to emerge. And I hope that you will see in the lessons that I provide, I was always thinking about how I wanted to emerge. I worked really hard from the day that I was exposed to Socrates to begin thinking about how am I going to influence these people in the future? How am I going to influence people like Jeff Snipes, a guy that I don't even know? He's a graduate student. He was a grad student at Stanford, and he was reading my book, a book that I wrote when I was in prison. And that book stayed with him so that when I got out of prison and I wrote him a letter, he connected with me. Okay? All of these connections, that's what I want you to be doing. Connect the dots of how, wherever you are right now, connect the dots to where you want to be. And if you can do that, if you can connect those dots, you can change your outcome. Right? It's like reading a book. You've read through a chapter, but you come to chapter 6, or maybe authoring a book, and now you're going to write the rest of the chapter. In fact, in my book, Earning Freedom, the first 4 chapters of it are kind of sad because you're reading the story about this kid. He's 20 years old. He's getting involved in coke, and he's busted when he was 23, and he goes inside and he's facing life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, and he's trusting all of his decisions to this defense attorney who's not really on his team, not really thinking about him, just trying to extract as much money from him as he can. And he's going to prison, and bam, he's slammed with 45 years. But before he gets there, he's inspired to change his life. And then the decisions that he makes results in him thinking about the people he needs to influence. And then he sets a course of action that will help him build that. That's what Earning Freedom is about. That's what the Mastermind course is about. That's what I'm striving to teach to you. So I'm Michael Santos with michaelsantos.com, and I'm going to be back tomorrow continuing the episode of how I taught the students at San Francisco State University, starting that course only 3 weeks after my imprisonment. But if you don't want to wait and read these episodes and listen to these episodes in sequence, it's very simple. Just go to my website at michaelsantos.com, put your email address, and I'll send you a digital copy of the book right now for free. You can also order a copy and have it sent to your loved ones. But if you want to continue listening free, very simple to do. If you've got access to the internet, just simply visit any of my social platforms, YouTube, iTunes. I've got 2 podcasts, Earning Freedom and Success After Prison. YouTube, either one. Please subscribe. Please rate and review on iTunes. That's the way we get more distribution. That's the way we share more information with our audience. You can visit my websites, again, michaelsantos.com or prisonprofessor.com. And just know, I'm 100% authentic. I never ask anybody to do anything that I didn't do, anything that I'm not doing right now. Because if you want to succeed, if you want to really crush it, these lessons have worked for me, and I have no doubt they can work for you. Thanks so much. We'll be back tomorrow with another inspiring episode of How to Succeed Through Struggle.